Hello, hello, hello. Today I'm talking with Ornella. We talked about growing up with libraries knowing her name, being allowed to be herself, and not being liked by technology. I'm Ivanul from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it. Hello, hello everyone, and hello Ornella. Is that how I should pronounce it? Ornella? Or how do you?
Yeah, that's perfectly fine, Ornella.
Wow. Okay. I prefer these days to ask it online instead of asking it before, because I think this is also what we should get used to much more. If we work with a person that we have never met, like, okay, typically in a different environment and different cultures, that we should be able to ask people around their names and everything. And when we're talking, I am at this moment, and let me show it to you. I am in Belgium, here in Ghent, and let's move to Vilnius, where you are at this very moment. Um, I've actually been to Vilnius. Yeah, I think for a wedding of a friend of mine a couple of years ago. I really loved it.
Cool. I have not been in Belgium, but that's a mistake I should fix.
Well, definitely, and I've said it already before to other people, and I think for many other agilists, if you're in Belgium, let me know. If I can definitely accommodate people and have, I don't know, well, depending on what's the time, if we have lunch or dinner, something together. Definitely, I like to invite agile friends over, depending, of course, on the time, because I have children who are at university, so they might be having other plans that we need to look a little bit around. But other than that, people are really, really well. And so we jumped into that, but tell us a little bit, who are you before we jump?
I always find that question a bit tricky, right? I mean, my name is Ornella, and I work as an agile coach. Currently, I work at a company called Vinted, and in a professional setting, I think that's a basic information about me. But then you can always take a bit more like philosophical aspect of that question, like who are you? And that's something that is pretty tricky. So yeah, for this context, I'd say yeah, Ornella is my name, agile coach, working at Vinted. Have been working at Vinted for 3 years, and I have been working as an agile coach for maybe 7. And I have been working in IT for 10 plus years now.
Wow, and Vinted, that's the second-hand shop where you can buy, where I can sell my clothes online and others can buy it, and then vice versa, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's a second-hand marketplace for pre-loved fashion and other lifestyle goods.
Yeah, I didn't know it was from Vilnius, but
Oh,
I've
it's
learned again
yeah.
something.
It's actually the first Lithuanian tech unicorn, so that's something of our, national pride. Vinted is a very well-known company here in Lithuania, of course, and in other markets across Europe.
Yeah, I don't have an account myself, but I would be surprised if my 16-year-old daughter doesn't have it, because I'm pretty sure she has. So yeah, it's well known indeed. But like I said, I had no idea where they were situated. So now I do.
Mhm.
Okay, let's jump into the questions. What is something that people usually don't know about you, but has influenced you in who you?
Yeah. So it's not something that I just randomly shared with people, but I think one thing that really influenced me as who I am right now is all the like fictional literature that I read at a very young age. So I was a real bookworm when I was a kid, and all the local librarians knew me by name. I think I started with, like reading every single fairy tale book that I found at the local library. Then I moved on to Astrid Lindgren, and if you have read these books, you know that they are very much about like friendship. It has a very strong like moral compass. It's really about like right and wrong, and I think it really shaped my some kind of like idealistic worldview, and the strong conviction that everything is possible. Yeah, so I think that's something that really influenced me at a very young age. Not something that I typically go and tell people.
Hmm. And I'm trying to think. So when you say that, was there? Could you give an example of how that influenced you?
I mean, reading those books, like, Peppa Longstocking, right? She's a young girl living alone with her horse and the monkey, right? And she can do everything. She's super strong. And in the fictional world, everything is possible, but everything at the same time is like with a certain sense of like naivety and goodness
Mm,
and like brightness in it, and like not even mentioning all of the fairy tales that I read. In fairy tales there's a very strong archetypes playing, like you have something that is like a dark bad character in the book, and there's something that is fighting for good. So imagine reading one after the other for like years and years and years. It really kind of shapes this worldview of what is right and what is wrong, and that you can always and you should always fight for what is right. And then that there's little limits, because these characters in those books, for the like children fictional books, they always have some sort of a heroism, some sort of like a character centricity, that they're like the center of the universe and everything happens according to like their destiny. So I think that really kind of formed this can do attitude in me, like reading this and not thinking about it as a fiction. Like, I do understand that these are not like real characters, but the situations are very relatable, right? There's connections, relationships, struggles, overcoming those struggles. That is definitely something that you can tie back to the real life, real world. So I think that reading this got me a lot of like of this inspiration, that if I don't know the way at the given moment, there's still a way. I just need to kind of keep looking. And I think
mm,
even now in my career and in my work, I still feel like this is really strong driving force. Um, there's rarely a challenge that I would say that's something that is impossible to be done. And it's always like, okay, I believe that there should be a better way. I believe we should be able to improve. I may not know how to do it, but like if there's a strong belief and strong principle, like about some sort of inherent goodness in it, I will look relentlessly to find that option, that way out.
mhm. Yeah, I really like that. Indeed, like you say, especially as a child, when you read these kind of things like the naivete, but it shows like a possibility. Everything is possible, and yeah, it's and of course there are limitations to how what we can do in the world. But if our mindset is like, okay, what are my options? Can I see options and not just see everything that blocks me? I can definitely see how that can have an influence on you. And somehow, yeah, I'm trying to come up with. I've spoken to someone else earlier on who was. I'm trying to come up with the name, but I can't at this moment. But who was really blocked. That I think it was even Oana that said I wasn't able to travel, but because I was
Oh
reading so
yeah,
many books, yes, I was able to travel in my mind, and because of that, I saw the world also in a completely different way, and that's a little bit similar to what you're saying. You are also traveling in your mind in a way that I can do a lot of stuff.
yeah,
Um,
definitely.
and I think even especially with the one book where you say, okay, that it's also clear as a child that a lot of that stuff is like fantasy, is like not possible. But even just the idea that, hey, maybe a little girl lives on her own with a horse and things like that, that even if we know as a child that's not probably not really true, but still, yeah, it's kind of, yeah, I understand that.
Yeah, and I think
That's
especially with Astrid Lindgren, she has a lot of uh, strong girl characters in her books. Of course, there are some books about like centered around boys, but there are some books about like very strong, independent young girls that are heroines, which I think is a little bit less popular. And maybe nowadays it's different. When I was growing up, it was you know usually about like strong prince saving a helpless princess. So I think that was also a very important aspect, like to see this breaking the typical gender sort of rules through the books, through this different like fictional lens.
and if I can ask, how was that in your world? If you look in your home country, Was that also a country where there is a lot of patriarchy, or was there also strong women around you? How was that? If you want to share about that.
Um, well, I guess it would be hard to tell in general about the country. In my personal context, I felt like there's a bit more of a patriarchy, and I think I felt it throughout majority of my life. I think the now we experiencing a bit more of that shift where your gender has less important role to play in terms of choosing your career or choosing like how you want to live your life. Um, but I do believe that there were certain expectations towards me, like how I should behave because I was a girl, like what I should or should not do. And I was a little bit of a troublemaker. I was not really like this. How to say, the good child. I was curious. I was like, I wanted to explore things. I think my parents actually allowed me to explore a bunch of things that may not necessarily fit the stereotypical gender roles. Like I used to go fishing with my dad, so I learned a lot of these, let's say, nature and
So he
survival
he
skills.
he treated you as an equal, and that level at similar as a boy. I don't know if you have any siblings, but it sounds like okay, he would treat you as if you were well, but that others would only do with their boys. I would say says okay, let's go fishing. Is that what I'm hearing, or am I hearing too much?
It's now hard to tell. It's all up for interpretation. But I think my dad really wanted to have a boy as a firstborn. So I'm a
Mm.
firstborn. I have a younger brother, but I do believe that my dad really wanted to have a boy. And I think it's what, four and a half difference between me and my brother. So my dad took me to these things that he used to do, like go play tennis with his friends, like take me for fishing, and I really enjoyed these activities. And but I also enjoy the other stuff that I love cooking. I am very handy in terms of like sewing or knitting and all of these like say female-ish things. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I didn't feel like I have constraint at home. Like I was allowed to try things that were interesting to me. But at school, for example, certain behaviors, like I was an active child, I would get into the conflicts with boys, for example. If there's an argument, I would stand up for myself. I got in some fights with boys, and you can imagine that at school it's not something like, if boys do that for some reason, that's
They accept
normal.
it, but if you do it as a girl, it's like,
Yeah,
well, come on, let's.
yeah. That was definitely some comments like, how could you do it? You are a girl, that's not how you're supposed to behave. So I don't think that it was as much in my household, like, these stereotypes that were enforced on me, but in more, public settings, like at school, I did felt like, it's a bit more like
and
patriarchy dominated
and
context.
And how did your parent, for example, if school react? I don't know if it ever went back to your parents or like, okay, she's misbehaving at school. Did your parents react in a way to that, or did they support you, or what worked then? I'm
I
trying to understand these
don't
dynamics because I
yeah.
find it very interesting. Also, as a parent, like, how do you deal with these kind of things?
Yeah, I don't think it was ever as serious to get back to home. Like, my parents would be called into the school. Uh, yeah, I was like I had to vanilla troublemaker, not super big troublemaker, but again, a bit against the norm for like good girl
Mhm.
sort of stereotype. So I don't remember situations where my parents would be called out to school or that they would have to, I don't know, like educate me on these situations. I guess it was more about, then I would get home, and if I would be upset and my mom would ask, why am I upset? Then it would be, through her like mentoring or coaching. But my mom, she's very, I'd say, she avoids conflict. So it was more about, maybe you could, stay out of it, maybe not get into these situations, maybe not to get into these conflicts. So it's not like she did not encourage me to stand up for myself, but I think I already had it in me, so that she did not have to tell me that I can
So she
actually.
wanted to tell you there is another option, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
more
yeah,
like you say, kind of coaching and mentoring.
yeah.
Because yeah, I can imagine also sometimes it's good to indeed know that there is more options than just fighting back. But at the same time, I also hear that she didn't tell you you're not allowed to do that or whatever, that you have to let people walk over you, that she didn't do either. So
Yeah.
it's probably more like, okay, I already see that my daughter is already good at that part. Maybe let's add a little bit of the other part.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh, that's that's very nice story that you tell. Okay, let's move to that next question. If you had not been doing what you've been doing now, do you have any idea what could have become of you? Was there
Mm.
anything, for example, that you were destined to become when you were young? Or
Well, if we talk about the destiny, so my grandmother, the mother of my mom, and my mom, they are both tailors. So if we
Mhm.
think about the destiny, maybe that was something that I should be a tailor. And I used to love, making clothes for my dolls, because then you grew up with the grandmother and my mom who would make clothes, and my mom actually worked at the theater at the moment. There she would make costumes for plays, and I would be in that surrounding in the theater, in like backstage of the theater, like looking into these costumes. Of course, I was fascinated by fashion. I was also a creative child.
and in a way, you're also in a fashion company in a way that, okay, you're not creating anymore, but your company has a little bit to do with it, right?
Yeah,
So,
I mean, for me, the appeal of Vinted is not as much of the fashion, but more of the sustainability. Well, I use Vinted
mm,
myself. I try to buy as much of the secondhand things as I possibly can. But yeah, like being surrounded by that fashion, I actually like I know how to sew. I know I have the skills, but I realized that that's not really what drives me. For me, the creativity was more of the process, and I went to the art schools as well in my teenage years. So I felt like maybe there's this creative side of me that could be how to say something for the future, but that was not it. I felt like I was too pragmatic for a career in arts. I didn't see that this life would be very easy in terms of like financial security, and
mm,
that you have to be like really really exceptional. And I honestly can say I'm like an average when it comes to be artistic. I still paint. Actually, like if you can see this cup, that's something that I made
mhm.
myself. So
Wow.
I still enjoy these things, but more as a recreational activity and not as a profession. um, at school, I was, I would say, well, not equally, but similarly good at both like humanitarian studies as well as STEM studies. Um, that made it a bit tricky for me, and for a very long time, I felt like being jack of all trades is somewhat bad thing. That you need to choose. You need to be good at something, like this one thing. Uh, but later in my career, I realized that actually being this like versatile and having lots of different skills can be really beneficial. I always knew that I want to work with people. It's important for me, like this connectedness, like working together, engaging. I'm extroverted, quite extroverted person myself. So in my early years of the university, business management was the what I studied in the university. I thought that maybe human resources, like people management, would be a career for me. And then I did the internship in people like human resources department, just to realize that they rarely see people. They see a lot of paperwork about people, but they rarely actually engage with people. Um, and IT was definitely not in the cards for me for a very long time. I'd say
Mm,
I believe that I don't like technology, and technology does not like me back. We didn't have a computer for a very long time in my household. So I got the first PC, I guess I was like, I don't know, maybe 14 years old. So I used it for gaming, but not for like, something else where I talked with quite a lot of peers in the industry, and quite a lot of people when they got their first personal computer, they really wanted to understand how it works. We really wanted to kind of program something. For me, that was not the use case. So yeah, I don't think that IT was, how to say, a destiny for me. But at the same time, I was not really sure where I fit with the bunch of different interests and bunch of different skills. So yeah, it was a bit
So
more of
you
that.
had a very broad, more education, because business management is, I think, is also rather broad. I actually have now a 19-year-old son who's actually studying this right now. But yeah, like you, that it's not clear in what direction it will go. He has some ideas, but indeed it's a very broad education. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I think
Um,
that was the reason why I chose it, because I didn't know what I want to choose. So it was like business management. That sounds applicable, to many different circumstances.
that is indeed a little bit what I was hearing. And in the end, it worked out fine. That's what I'm hearing, because it's
Oh yeah,
your.
yeah. It was really
And how did you? Because you said before, I wasn't really appealed to IT, or not as one some of the things. What made you move, or that was there something that triggered that move in a way?
um, I'd say that I found a different relationship to technology than it was in the beginning. I realized that for me, it's easy to learn things than I actually need to use them. Like if there's actual practical reason for
Mm.
me to learn something. That's why I didn't really found my fit in like academia. I didn't even go for the master's, so I only have bachelor's degree. Because like academia didn't really appeal to me, because you learn things in theory, but then you don't really have a chance to apply. And I want to have this like real life challenge, so that it would trigger my need to actually learn something. So for example, when I was working, like still very early in my career, I was working in a company called AdFirm, and in my role I was in this role that was not really well defined. AdFirm was building this like new technology, new product called real-time bidding, that was at that point in time innovation in advertising, online advertising industry. And they needed someone to look into the very raw data, basically like lists of domain names, and figure out what's working, what's not. So I started from very manual, working with big Excel. And you work with big Excel, you have a lot of information, you need to sort it out somehow. So you start looking into, pivot tables, or then looking into macros or something like that. Then I had this need for getting more data, because like this Excel was something like CSV file, actually was something that I would get extracted by someone in the organization. And then I went to them and I was like, what's happening? Like, how do you get that data from me? And it's like, oh, here's a database. You need to know SQL to kind of access that information. I was like, oh, SQL, okay, what's that? So you get these skills because you had this like real life problem that you need to solve. And for me, just learning technology for the sake of it, without actual task at hand, it was really difficult. Why? Like, why do I need that? Like, what's the benefit here? But then,
And now it was the opposite. You had a problem, and then
yeah,
people told you, well, for that problem, there is a technology that you could learn, and then you were like bitten by the technology.
yeah, and it's actually, that's not that hard, right? I mean, you can Google a bunch of things. I guess like I was happy to have good Googling skills at that point in time, but like the bunch of these things, like I'm good when people explain the things. I'm good and fast at picking up what they're saying. I'm like, because I'm extroverted, it's easy for me to approach people and ask, and direct my own learning. So that's what happened. Like I worked with a bunch of smart people in IT. Whenever I needed to solve something, I would go for them to ask the specific questions. They would give me some sort of tips. The rest I would try to Google. I would just try, do, experiment. And through these experiences, I started working as a business analyst for that particular technology and for that particular product in the product development team. So that's how I actually officially started working in IT. Before, like the work I did previously was in IT field, but it was not really in the product development teams. So I had more of that, like IT, general IT experience, but like my start of working in product development team was when I moved from this real-time bidding data analyst, all sorts of ad hoc skills and ad hoc tasks, and the business analyst role for the product team.
That's a really nice story. And I'm asking more because I think lots of people, sometimes we think, oh, if I just look at my children, it's like you learn one thing and that's the most important decision in your life. And then you go in
Right.
that direction. Like, no,
That's
these
super
days.
scary, right?
Exactly. And that blocks them. It's like, yeah, but that's the most important choice and whatever. And it's like, no, you will evolve and then you will something come on your path and then you move in a little bit direction. And like you say, many people, or at least I know at least quite a few people who like to learn just like you by giving them a real problem. I have to say that for my son in business management, the well, I don't know if it's a school or not, but they had, for example, one of the classes they had to how did I call it? This is some kind of game where they had to actually play with a real factory, and
Mm,
so they had to do buying stuff, selling stuff, organizing the whole factory. So there's actually a lot of parameters you have to play with and have to think it per day, then say your salary, and then the week after you get some feedback like, okay, we run it with your parameters for 6 months. That's the result on return of investment. That's this department's doing that, and that's like, wow.
yeah,
And that's so much more interesting. Because of that, you understand so much more about whip limits, about so many other stuff. That's like, okay, you want to have just in time for your factory because otherwise you have your yeah, too much stock and whatever. Yeah, out of a book that's just boring. Who
yeah,
cares?
exactly.
I mean,
Like you don't have context in which this particular piece of theory is applicable. So yeah, like for me, it was really really hard to learn that way, and you can imagine that it's a little bit demotivating. Where there are certain things where I'm like engaged and I'm interested and like excelling in these fields, and then others are just like learning by memory, and it's really hard. Like I don't like memorizing things, and I don't have very good memory when it comes to like knowing facts, names, dates, like all of these things. For me, context is the key. For me, it's important to understand cause and effect, and like have some sort of like mental model about the thing, or like exercise this deductive reasoning around something, and not just memorizing stuff. Like especially in this age of technology, like this memorizing skill set is so obsolete, and in the light of internet, now AI, like why would you even invest in like memorizing things?
yeah, I can imagine that for some things when you have to make split seconds decisions, if you're operating someone, you have to have some kind of skills and some kind of also knowledge about what could be kind of problems. But like I fully agree, like 90% of the jobs that's totally irrelevant. Probably more like 95%. And the school system is very much into memorizing and how we do. And
Yeah,
actually, we see that many of the youngsters these days cannot memorize anymore because they have. Yeah, and for me, it's the same thing. If I can store it somewhere else where I can find it back, I don't want it into my memory. Let put it in an agenda, put it in a to-do list, put it in some other system that I trust, and that's it.
yeah,
Okay, if I change too much the systems, that will be a problem because sometimes I look back at it 10 years later. It's like, okay, in what system did I record that manual or whatever? But still, like you say, then you Google it and you find I've created the manual for our house for all the little gadgets and whatever stuff we have. And in the beginning, my children, like when we moved in here 5 years ago, they well, at least one of them really read it completely, and now it's like that. Don't put it in there. I will just Google it because you found it on the internet, and yeah, that's
yeah,
and okay.
exactly.
So I, yeah, I'm still wanted to somehow have it a little bit, mostly for yeah, whatever when it's hard to, for example, to get on the internet, how to do that. That should be somewhere in the in the manual how to reboot stuff and whatever. But other than that, I agree. Much more is just stored on the internet. It's a lot less about knowing.
Yeah.
Really great stories. I really love that. Let's move to that third question. What do you consider at this moment your biggest challenge, or at least the biggest challenge that you want to share open on the internet, and why is that a good thing?
So I think I have this challenge for a bit now. I'm trying to remember, like at least a year. The challenge is that uh, the things that used to help me recharge are no longer working. And I really enjoy putting a lot of energy in things that I do, but then I need to recharge, like refill my battery. And in the past, what really worked well for me is changing the environment, going for like a vacation, visiting some other country, or going to a conference, talking to other people, like as an extroverted, like getting recharged from like very interesting conversations. And I noticed that in the past year and a bit, then I was really exhausted, where I felt like now I really need to recharge. I would do these things that I used to do, and they would not really do a trick for me anymore. So that's my challenge at the moment. I'm trying to figure out how to better manage my energy, how to find these other ways of replenishing the energy that I have, and also to find a different relationship with these activities that help me out. I still enjoy them very much. It's just that now it can also cost me energy. Not not I'm not regaining as much as I used to. Um, why is this a good challenge to have?
Mhm.
I think it's an opportunity for me to learn more about myself. It's an opportunity for me to grow. It's an opportunity to find something that is more sustainable. Uh, I guess the things that used to work for me were good fit for that point in time, right? And I grow and I change every year, and it must mean that something has changed significantly enough that these old patterns no longer work for me. So yeah, it's an interesting point in time. Looking forward to discover what will I discover about myself.
Yeah, I really like that you're, well, so open and transparent about. So sometimes people talk about the challenge and after said, well, I've already passed that challenge, and that's fine. Everybody has to share, but at the same time, what I like about your story here is that you're in the middle of it. So of course, it's not clear where it will lead to, and if it will. Well, I assume every time we learn something, it makes our life better. But at the same time, some of these things that we learn about ourselves are sometimes hard to learn. Because when you get a mirror about yourself, well, how was it? I don't remember anymore. There's someone who said that um, everybody is an angel with assholes, and like everybody has some bad parts, some negative part, or we have some things up our other attic that maybe things that we're not particularly proud of. It's not like we're going to hide it, but at the
Mm.
same time, it's not like I don't want to talk about it the whole day. And when you're learning about yourself, you see a lot of these things passing by, and somehow, what I've noticed with many people, the negative parts we don't always want to hear, and the positive parts we kind of ignore because it's like, yeah, we know that
I know it,
already, and and
yeah.
and and I think we have to be open also for ourselves, and like accepting, hey, wait a minute, that was actually a good thing. Let's also stand a little bit still with that part, and maybe can we do more with it? Can we learn more? What is that? Is that something we want to do more, or is that, yeah, that was good at a certain point, but yeah, okay, that's fine. Let's. These are really, like you say, interesting times to learn about yourself.
Yeah.
That's a very.
And I found that it's really helpful to me actually to share this openly, because at the end of last year, I think sometime September, October, I really felt exhausted, like to the level of burnout. And I went to the conference, I think in the beginning of like end of October maybe. And I was talking to some people, like, people who met me before, maybe not necessarily are my friends or like we know each other very well, but we have met me. And they said, like, there's a noticeable difference in your energy level, in your like ways of how you engage. And like I was very open saying that, now I feel like in this energy dip where I really have little energy. And I talked with a bunch of people, and they shared their stories when they were in the burnout, what they did, like, and that was super helpful. Like, I felt recharged by only listening to that, like knowing. And again, I guess it relates to the point where I just started, right? That there is a way. You believe that there is a way, that there is a way to like move forward, and like, reading the stories, talking to other people, they could also inspire you, and they can show you that, well, I had the challenge before, and this is what I did, that's what helped me. And it does not necessarily have to help me, or like using the same recipe, but then I have this like conviction that it's possible, like you can resolve this, like you can find ways. So I think that being open
Yeah,
about,
many people have done it before you.
yeah.
Of course, we want it to be solved like more yesterday than tomorrow. But that's part of the problem, I would say, that we sometimes want it to go too quickly, and these
Yeah.
kind of things take time.
Yeah, and
Um,
that's also like, it's a little bit of a challenge, right? Accept the fact that, and that was like, I had this like inner dialogue with myself where I'm like, now I know that I'm like, at this level of like very low energy, and I want to force myself out of it with the sheer power of my will, which is like, bonkers. You would not accept yourself to, I don't know, get better after the flu just because you wish it very much. It's like shared power power of your will, and somehow these sort of situations, it feels like I can force myself out of it, and like I had this inner dialogue with myself about, hey, if I feel like that, if you go to the workout and you train really hard, you do not expect to reduce the sour muscles just by wishing that away. You go to bed, you rest. And why would I do something different in terms there? I have like this mental exhaustion that it takes time, and I need to give myself that time. And I was trying to convince me that these all sort of, metaphors and examples why I should actually stop forcing myself out of this state, but instead embracing that state and allowing myself to be in that state, because it's natural, it's normal, it's not something that for some reason like I failed and I was not able to manage at a sustainable level for ever. That other people that I admire that are very well accomplished also had these situations. So I think that that's already like a learning, and it's already a benefit, like having these moments of reflection.
I really like that, and yeah, indeed, I've I've used once a similar metaphor that you say. You talk about running and or going to the gym and feel sore muscles. I used it even worse metaphor in the sense that with a client I was coaching, that I said, okay, if you have a broken leg, you can't just wish it to be
Yeah.
automatically. No, you have to get the cast. You have to take time. You cannot use your leg for a while. It's broken and it's normal. Yeah, okay. But mentally, when something, and I don't know if it's broken or if it's whatever, it doesn't really matter. But there is something that we have to give time to get it back up. And the more pressure we did, and it's a little bit like what we say also about growing plants and everything. It's not by pulling a plant that it will grow faster. No, you have to give it water, you have to nurture, and it will grow on its own speed.
Yeah.
And the more you pull on it, the worse the problem gets. And that feels a lot with that's also changing as a scrum master. When you try to pull on people, make it go faster, that doesn't always help. We have to give people the time, and sometimes, yeah, put them also like, okay, you can change this, but yeah, like
Mm.
thanks for sharing this so openly, because I think it's really important that people are aware about some of these, even if you're in the middle and it feels like it's not fully solved. At the same time, I feel like the fact that you're allowing yourself already to be in that space, it makes it already very well, I don't know, very far, but it means that your journey isn't just started, that you're already partly.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move to that next question, and talking about passion and all these things, because even the fact that you want to go faster at the moment that it's hard, it's a lot of drive, a lot of passion. do you know where for you that passion and that drive is coming from? Is that from, I don't know, in my fantasy then it's, oh, maybe it's because from fishing with your father or the books that you talked about. Is there some other kind of story that is that you can see?
um, I don't know. I mean, I was thinking about that question quite a lot. I used to have a very good answer to that particular question, but it changed. So, as I mentioned, I feel like I changed and some like core aspects about me changed through time. So the answer to that question that I used to have is not applicable anymore. And I tried to like twist it a little bit. I thought it a bit more in a way when, like, what is the situation when I'm like really excited or like really really engaged. And for me, I'm really excited and I'm really engaged whenever I have to solve this like complex real life problem together with other people. So I think that some really big bits of that drive for me is like curiosity, like the novelty aspect. I like to innovate. I like to find new ways of thinking. I don't really like to repeat myself. I don't really like to do things that I already did, because it's like it's not really challenging. Like you can get really really good, and there's an aspect of mastery, and uh, it's not like I cannot appreciate mastery. I feel like I certainly seek it in a certain aspects of my work and life, but I'd say that curiosity is a bit more dominant in that puzzle or the formula. The other thing is, I think the result of the goal, I have to have a very strong sense of the purpose, like what is gonna happen after we accomplish something, like what is the reason of actually doing it, what's the change that I expect to happen after we have completed one or the other thing. So it could be very complex, it could be very challenging, but if I don't see the end goal, then it would be, this is like a comparison of solving a puzzle. I like puzzles, but that's not like I would just enjoy solving puzzles, because puzzle is doesn't have another purpose of just
Mm.
being itself, right? So it could be very complex and you could feel accomplished because you solved it. But to me, it's like it doesn't really tie back to some sort of real world benefits. Um, so that purpose, that end goal is really important to me as well. And working with others, like this, I don't think it's really about a sense of belonging. It's not like I want to associate myself with a particular group of people, but it's more about this uh, partnership, that relationship where you have a shared goal in mind, where you trust other people for their professionalism, for the same engagement and passion that they bring, that you work together, you collaborate, like this. I don't find a good good word in English at the moment, but yeah, connectedness to some extent is also something that I find very important and very motivating. I don't enjoy really working on my own, and I think in the line of work that we are at, like in agile coaching, it's really not something that you could do on your own, right? It's about system. It's about
Mm.
like this complicated adaptive human system that if you want to influence it somehow, you need everyone to kind of do their part. And for me, it's fascinating, like this whole complexity and all of this uncertainty and ambiguity that really is fascinating to me, because it's so like filled with options, and that curiosity is really like triggering for me. It's like, okay, so what we can do with this situation, what we can do in order to achieve that purpose, like how can we work together to better achieve what we want to achieve. So yeah, I think that's a lot of what is driving me. Yeah.
I really like that, and it links it to what you said in the beginning also about people. The fact that you were thinking about going into HR because you want to work with people, and yeah, I was already thinking at that time. Well, as an agile coach, you probably have more contact with people and actually working much more with people
Oh yeah,
than
definitely.
than in, well, It depends on how large the organization is and what does it mean, because I do know some HR people that are actually working a lot with people. But in many organizations, especially the bigger they are, it's yeah, it becomes a lot much more bureaucratic and paperwork than indeed working with people. And that's I hope not the case for agile coaching
Yeah, no.
in most organizations. So that's definitely something where I think the drive, what you said also, and it came out already at a lot of the other questions, the way you were. So thanks for sharing that. Let's move to that next question. With everything you're talking about, and you're still young, so what is your biggest achievement so far? What do you think that you're really proud? And the question below that I always like to ask before we start there is that this is really your moment that you can brag and you can be really proud. Is that easy for you,
To
Ornella,
brag?
to brag?
um, I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, um, more often for me, the challenge and the achievement looks bigger and more significant until I achieve it. As soon as I achieve it, somehow this
Mm,
other part of me triggers. It's like, okay, that was doable. Like anyone can do it basically. So for that reason, I also have like very strong recency bias when it comes to evaluating my achievements. It feels like it's still like going uphill. Every new challenge is like bigger than the one before. Again, as I said, like, because for me it's important, like, keep moving, innovate, don't stay in the same place. Like, I don't really enjoy like repeating the things or doing the same thing over and over. So with all of these constraints in mind, I think I'm really proud and I really want to brag about Agile in Europe, because
mhm.
me and some of my friends, like the team of six, we were organizing Agile in Europe last year in 2023. And I think it was really successful event. I actually had, I don't know, goosebumps at the end of this event. Like, there are so many moments of such a profound energy and such a profound emotion that that was really something special. And I think it was something special for many people who attended. So I'm really, really proud of that accomplishment. Of course, that's not only me, right? That was a group effort. But then at the same time, I feel like I can brag about it.
It's
So
yeah, I think that's the interesting part with that question. There is nowhere where it says it has to be something you would do. If I don't know, a team of footballers or whatever, volleyball, basket, if they reach the championship, you can still be proud as one of
yeah.
the team players says, "Hey, I reached that," and it's like, "Yeah, but the rest of it helped." Yes, but I can still be proud of it, and it's indeed something like you say. Now I've been to many of the ale conferences, and yeah, so I really loved it. Unfortunately, we had children that, because it's always at the end of August,
Mm,
where my children now with students are in the middle of exams if they have to repass exams. So that was not an option this year. Not that I can really help, because they're at a level that they don't need any help, but at that level, I definitely want to be there for support, even if it just means that they can do eye rolling around me because I'm asking stupid questions. That might not. That still is more support than they realize, I think. So I didn't
mm,
come, but I heard indeed. I was, yeah, I did see some things happening on social media. People writing. I have some, well, many friends that were there that really said this was a very good addition. So yeah, that was really nice to see. You actually were pulling off also, I think this was a headliner of all female keynotes, if I remember correctly,
yeah, yeah.
which is also something that many people liked about it, because we do have enough women in the agile space, and it's sad that that it's even worth mentioning,
Mm,
because it should be just normal at some level, and not that it has to be for because every conference we should have more 50-50, but we have to do the counterbalance for all these other conferences that don't bring any females
yeah.
at keynote. So I definitely really like that part. But other than that, it was just, yeah, I've seen so many different things working really well and many people liking
Mm. Funny enough, we did
happening.
not really had this vision of having all female keynotes. It's just that the out of all the keynotes, we really wanted to have this like interactive keynote. We knew that one of them we wanted to have Hede Helfand, the author of
Mhm.
Dynamic Reteaming, because we actually tried to make sure that she's able to travel to Vilnius for that occasion. So we arranged that she would do some consulting at Vinted, so that we could cover her costs for the travel, and then she stayed for Ale. So because of it's rather unusual for people to travel from across the ocean to to open space event. So we definitely knew that we want to have her keynote. And then Sylvia and Suzanne Taylor's, they pitched their topic for Stop and Smell the Roses, and that's the one that we picked for the Thursday. I think it was so fitting. Um, I'll tell a little bit other part of the how we organized
Mhm.
Dale and why it's so important how we chose those speakers. And then Nancy Beer, she was just wow. I mean, I was amazed. She got standing ovation. Like her keynote was just perfect, and how we were planning Ale from the very first meeting, we really thought and focused a lot on the user centricity. So we really
Mhm.
thought a lot about the experience. So we would walk through like what is the experience of the person attending Dale for the first time? How do we find the venue? Like they walk up the stairs, what do we see? Really played a lot of these like exercises in our heads and on paper and visual tools as well, to bring that experience as a first class citizen in the whole planning process. And that's exactly when we were planning like the keynotes, it was really about what kind of vibe do we want to create. That interactivity was one aspect, but then putting them in a certain sequence was also very important, and that's how we actually picked them, like thinking from that experience standpoint. So okay, so we want everyone to feel welcome, to like get grounded, and Stop and Smell the Roses just sounds like a perfect fit for it. And especially knowing the famous twins and their energy and everything that they bring to the table, like who would be better to open the space for all the Ale community. And then with Nancy's talk about the timing in teams. And
Diversity. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it was wow. Yeah, I just like telling about it. I'm like reliving the whole thing, and it was really, really amazing. And the whole planning, like we started working on the event from I think 1st of November. So it was like a good 9 months to prepare. We had the team, as I mentioned, of 6 people, and like we had such a good dynamic in that team. And it was just such a positive and pleasurable experience throughout the whole planning. And I think it contributed to the burnout that I mentioned before, because it was really emotionally and mentally exhausting. And it's a good thing. Like I really enjoy doing it. I'm really proud of it. I'm really happy about how it turned out. At the same time, like we put and it's not only me who felt like quite exhausted after it. Like we all put so much of us in that event. Like we put so much energy, we put so much of the intentionality. And um, and after everything finished, I remember after the last cleanup, we went out, and I felt like there's this huge rock rolling out of my shoulders. Like I could suddenly breathe with like 30% more of my lung capacity, something like that. Um, so yeah, I mean, uh, passion is definitely something to be careful about. It's very easy to get overboard for the things that you really, really care about. And Agile in Europe community is something that is really special and really important to me.
Yeah, and yeah, you mentioned all these names. Yeah, yeah. There's many more even that attended and that did things that was really nice. But yeah, the names that you mentioned, yeah, I think I know all of them. I love them.
Yeah.
I've loved Hedi's book. I know, yeah. With Sylvia, I worked. That might actually be related to your story. With Sylvia, I worked on in the United when she was still living in the United States in Seattle. I worked with her doing a workshop around creating teams, also based on the McCarthy, so the core protocols. And what's
Mm-hmm.
interesting there is that Jim and Michelle McCarthy, they have a concept that they call recoil. And what they say is that what I've learned from them is that when you do a big achievement, it's normal that you have some kind of recall after it. And with that, they mean like it's a little bit like if you pull a trigger of a gun, there is also yeah, you're moved in the other direction. And they say, and I've noticed it ever since, that indeed when you do a large achievement, that the day after it's like kind of black hole. It's like, whoa. And the best way for them to get out of that in if it's at that small level is to actually do some kind of adventure and not plan anything, but just, I don't know, go on a walk or do something that brings again energy. And many people, when they've finished something and they achieved a large thing, they say, okay, let's go for the next goal and the
Yeah.
next goal and the next goal. The problem is that that drains then so much energy, and it's usually much better to say. And I had very similar feelings after AL as well, ALE as well. It's a couple of years ago that it was really intense week that I really loved. And then you, especially if I remember one year I had to leave a little bit earlier because I couldn't follow the closing keynote. Can't come up with the name, but I do know what person that gave that keynote. I had to leave just before that keynote, and I remember going into the airport feeling really lonely and like, oh, come on, my friends are all enjoying now a wonderful keynote, and like I have to go. But okay, that was a decision that was taken half a year ago that was really needed to go back. So I knew why I had to go back for personal reasons, and still at the same time, it felt like a little bit like you say, you feel that wow, it's been a big thing, and now I lack some of the energy in many different kind of things.
Mm.
So it's definitely something I recognize. Yeah, and I think I've seen many tweets about Nancy's keynote also as well,
Yeah, that
about
was
how
wow.
personal. And yeah, I don't. Yeah, I know a little bit part of it, but again, let's not spoil it. People have. I hope she does it again at many different places, because I do think it's an important story to share.
Mm.
So that's a
Definitely,
good
definitely.
thing. Okay, and talking about personal things, let's talk about personal agility. Is there any tip that you can share with people that you say, okay, this is something that really helps me and that you want to
I don't know if that technically is a personal agility tip, but I'm still gonna share. And it's not
share?
something that I came up with myself. It's actually something that my previous manager and mentor, Colin Grossman, told me once. Um, I don't really remember what was the situation, but since then, I told this quote to so many other people. So I kind of feel like it's a bit of my
Sure.
personal
It
tip
became
now.
part of
Yeah, it became a part of what I say to people. So he said that Ornella, best poker player is not the one with the best hand. The best poker player is the one who plays the best game with the hand that they have. So I think what I took out of it and what is really important that uh, we cannot really influence the situation as much as we wish, and it is really not as valuable to say that, well, if this and that would be different, I would be successful, or if this and that would be different, I could achieve
Mm,
things. So it's really about accepting the situation as it is and really figuring out what you can do with it. I think it really kind of helped me uh, to reduce a level of frustration that I used to have about, situations, sometimes people in those situations where I would be, that person, or, oh, that thing that happened, it would really drive me crazy, like, because there's little that you can do about it. So,
mm.
so when he said that, it was so profound. It really stuck with me. And he said it to me like, I don't know, I mean, at least 5 years ago. So it's been a while already. And since then, I don't remember how many other people I said the same thing. And I already hear that other people quote, like, use that quote. So I think that's an important message. And I think it has to do a lot with agility. So yeah, not sure if that classifies.
Well, the many people, when I send out the questions, so spoiler alert for the people who don't know, I do send out the questions before. Of course, people can just watch the videos and see the main questions. But when I send out these questions before, sometimes ask me, "What do you mean? Could you define it?" And I on purpose don't want to answer that question because I want to leave it open. I want that diversity and give people the openness to go in all kind of directions. I'm really interested. I really like the story because it reminds me, and I don't know the details anymore, but I do know that um, just a couple of years ago, that not or months ago, sorry, Ken Beck wrote something about playing poker as well, and that was there were some interesting things that he wrote as well about. And so there's definitely a lot of metaphors that we can learn from playing poker. I've never played poker. I do have my oldest one that is interested in that, and in that sense, I'm always interested. Okay, what are lessons that people can learn? And yeah, I think in the agile community, we're really fond at making games to teach people. But I think what you're doing is now the opposite: is you take an existing game or your manager, whatever, and try to see what can I learn from that. And indeed, that is so true. The fact that people sometimes feel like, yeah, but I'm missing this and that is part. And yes, of course, your world would be better, but somehow some people with the same deck of cards will have a better game, and that is the part. It reminds me of an interview I once saw with twins. They were also twins, and they were twins for a very broken family. So their parents were, I don't know, drug addicts and bigger, lots of different problems. And one person became really a wealthy banker and really a wonderful person doing really good for the world and making a lot of money, but not just making a lot of money, but also good for other people. And the other became actually a drug addict and having lots of problems. And for whatever reason, they did an interview. So I saw an interview. I don't know, remember where it is, more than 10 years ago, somewhere on television, and they interviewed both of them, and they showed the life of their parents, and both of them said more or less the same line, like, how else could I turn out? The one said, I definitely didn't want to become like my parents, so I made sure I did good grades and whatever. And so, because of this bad situation, I became such a good person. And the other used it as an excuse to say, because I had such a lousy situation, there was nothing else. I had no role models. There was not, I could not become better. But there you have a child that is actually the same age because they're twins, living through the same hell at the same time and still dealing with it in a different way. And this is not to blame the one or saying this is so much better yet. It's like, okay, depending on how our attitude is, it can help us. And it doesn't mean that everything can be solved with attitude. If you're living now in Gaza, or if you're living in Ukraine, there's a lot of problems that you can't solve yourself at your level. But again, the mindset might help you look at it in a more positive or a more negative way. And I really like that part of your story. So thank you. And when you said you learned that from your manager, when that happened, how did you react? Was that easy for you to get to understand that message?
Yeah, I think so. I think the simplicity of the metaphor, and it was like if he would comment on this particular situation that we had, and he would say, you should think differently in this situation, I don't think it would land as well as the metaphor that he offered. He kind of put it there. He did not really kind of said to me that, you should do this or that. He just put it there and, up for picking. So I think in that situation, the use of the metaphor, and then the fact that it's really easy to remember, really, really kind of had the impact. Of course, I think over the years, it kind of refined the perspective even more. Like the first time you kind of switch that, thing in your head, it's like, oh, okay, maybe there's another way to look at it. And then you practice that, like switching, like flipping the script over and over, it becomes more of a like natural pattern. So for me, I would say nowadays I'm more embracing it than back in the day, like back 5 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not because it's easy to hear that it's easy to implement. That's still something else.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
might know that yes, this is what I need to do, but it also shows a little bit that attitude, and a lot of that is also a habit and it's also learning. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
in the agile world, we talk a lot about mindset, and I do believe agile mindset is so important. But over the years, I come to learn that actually the way I've learned my agile mindset is by doing stuff, is by
Oh yeah.
practicing stuff, is by solving stuff, is by okay, and then gradually I learn okay in smaller steps, and it's too hard, okay, like a smaller step, and like, and I gradually learn a lot of that, and I didn't learn it from a book in a way. I learned it from doing stuff, and these days it sometimes feels that we try to, yeah, too much push people into that, yeah, you have to learn it. And what you're saying is that for you, that metaphor that your manager was using was helping you to see it, but even then it took you some time before you get used to it and got better at it. That's what
Mm,
that's all nice, really. Okay, let's move to that next question about remote work. And
mm.
I don't know, is Vinted a very remote kind of company, or how should I say it?
Um, well, for the lack of a better word, we work in a hybrid mode. We have an office. I personally go to the office every day. Um, we have teams there where some people would work remotely. We have teams where people may go to the offices, but they are located in different offices. So there's still a lot of that work that is happening in either co-locate, like fully co-located, like some sort of workshops or offsites or something where people would fly in the same location, for example. There are certain situations where we go full remote, and there are situations that there's a mix of attendees in like both ways. So I think that's what I find trickiest.
Mm,
And while I have to admit, it's like remote work is no longer something that we explicitly talk a lot about. To
mhm.
me, it feels more like a new norm. um, I was thinking like what would be the most recent insight or like learning when it comes to the work, the attendees being remote. So I think that's particular about the situations where we have people in this and the other way. And the learning is that it may feel easier to create the single flow, a single experience that you would then do for both, but that I feel it like leads to like very suboptimal results, because people that are in the location on site, they would not get the benefit of being on site, and then people in the remote, then if they forced to act in the same setup where people who are co-located, then again it's not the optimal setup for them. So it's not always applicable, but then if possible, think about these experiences and these flows differently for people on site and online. So basically not try to enforce the single format, and if possible, create this like a sync track for the people who are all remotely and for the people who are all on site, and then synchronize only at the points where it's necessary. So if let's say we have some sort of workshop where we start with the introduction and presenting the exercise, listen mode is really not that different for on-site and online. But then if you need to go into some sort of collaboration, you can split groups that only people who are online are working in the one group, or multiple groups using virtual collaboration tools, and then people who are on site working on site with like physical collaboration tools, discussing face to face. And I think it's not trying to uh, like unify, but instead actually accept that both have its strengths and weaknesses,
Mm.
and try to accommodate those groups like separately to the largest extent possible.
I really like that it, yeah, we have to basically embrace also the differences and look where it is. And I, yeah, um It's interesting that you talk about hybrid, because I think hybrid these days means a lot of different things and to a
Yeah.
lot of different people. Because indeed, I'm actually working on a book for hybrid tips for people, and in that, when I'm talking with people about it, there is a lot indeed where is it about a hybrid meeting, or is it about hybrid working? Because hybrid meeting is something, yeah, okay, we have people in the office and we have people remote, but hybrid working could be that we always have meetings fully remote or fully in the office, but never combined.
Mm,
That's two different things. Hybrid might mean, yeah, that I'm using whatever two other things combined that has nothing to do with remote work, and that's really an interesting concept to see that, yeah, hybrid, whenever people do. And I really liked how you immediately explained. You said, okay, this is hybrid, but what does that mean, hybrid? Before I could even ask the question, you already said, okay, that's what it means. And I think that's so important, to explain, like, okay, how much remote work do we still do? um I think we're like, I think you said it as well. It's like, remote is not going away. It's part of our lives today. It was, I think, the first thing I worked remote with remote teams was in 2005 at the lab. Actually, in my very first agile coaching work, I was working after just a couple of months or even weeks with people from yeah, 4 hour time zone difference. So very quickly, that was remote kind of work, and it worked. It made things different. I had to look for ways of do, but it did actually work. Um, and I was already convinced back then. Okay, it will take a while before more people get used to that, but it will not go away. And
mm,
okay, COVID helped us to move much more into that direction. People have been seeing it. People have also saw that where there were some problems. Okay, partially it worked because we were so much working together physically that we could, well, take for a few months not to see each other. But of course, you can't do that for 10 years. You still need to have some kind of interaction. And what does that mean? And like you say in your tip, well, yeah, make sure that you find the focus for the right kind. I really like. Let's move to the next question. And I think you really, from what I understand, you had a lot of ideas about books. What's a book that you have read? In the beginning was, what's the last book, but I didn't want to do. And it was not just books. I think you had, yeah, other, for me, I think the question is also some more just like, what are the resources, podcast things? Most people like to talk about books,
mhm.
because I that's this the question. But what are things that you want to share?
Yeah.
And actually, you shared a few names. I wasn't always sure what book it was, but that made it even interesting, more interesting. Thing.
Okay, so technically, speaking purely technically, the last book I actually read cover to cover is this one. Like, it's How to Be Stoic: Ancient Wisdom for Modern Living. So that would
Oh.
be the like technical answer to your question. Another book that I quite recently read is not really a full-blown book. It's how the author puts themselves. It's a mini book. To me, it looks more like an MVP of the book, and it's Bet, Success Metrics, and Road Mapping by John Cutler. And it's a Word document where it's like 40 something pages. Very excellent material. I highly recommend. Uh, and you can actually contribute. Like, if you read the book, you like what you read, you can pay to the author. Um, However, that was the reason why I asked, because books contain very small part of my like learning, and I think I wrote to you that for me it's I like learning from people, because not
Mhm.
everyone is actually a published author. And some people who are
Mm.
excellent at their field, very knowledgeable, very experienced, they are not necessarily have a book published. On the other hand, even if they have a book published, I think book has some sort of, how to say, it has to be refined to some extent. You really stay with these thoughts for a long time, and it may lack a bit more raw example, like actual, like real life experiences, or even multiple experiences that caused an author to formulate some sort of thought or the insight, right? And I think going to that like uh, really kind of raw information for me is how I learn best. For me, it's really
Mm.
important to integrate information first in my mental model, and then I can apply it. Like as I mentioned before, for me, it's really important to learn by practice, but I like to conceptualize things. So whenever I learn a new thing, and that's typically how it works for me. There's like a new thing that I want to learn, and then I would immerse in it, and I would like read some books, maybe read some articles or watch some videos, because I respond a little bit better to people talking. So even if someone recommends me a book, I would first go and see if there's a some sort of recording of the conference talk by that person, so I would listen to the conference talk instead of actually reading the book. There are a bunch of books that I read, but not cover to cover, but instead like reading chapters or even rereading some books like over and over. So for example, we talked about dynamic reteaming, right? I have that book,
Mhm.
that's a resource that I often like recall to kind of uh, dig deeper whenever I have a specific context. And like, okay, she was talking about a certain pattern, and now I need to understand like how to best support the particular pattern. And then I would go back to the book and I would read it again. So I think I mentioned multiple people to you, and that really in the past few years were some like figures that I wanted to learn from. And it feels to me that in the past 2 years, the maybe most like biggest concept that I was learning was domain driven design.
Mhm.
And in that field, where like the domain driven design community is just wonderful. Um, I met so many interesting people there, and I really enjoy that I have this luxury of going meeting them in person, like going to sim conferences, discussing. And that really kind of shaped a lot of my current understanding. I have not read the blue book. Like everyone who knows about domain driven design knows that there's this like legendary book by Eric Evans, who's like coined the term domain driven design.
Somewhere there. I don't. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. So the blue book is known for being a hard read.
But it's
And
also, yeah, exactly. It's very hard to read. There is actually if I can show it. So here is another, no, not here, the other direction. Oh, there. The blue green thing is a book about domain driven design, which is more, I think it's called the Green Book these days. So
Mhm.
it's a distilled version that makes it easier
And
to
who's the
learn
author
about
of
it.
that one?
It's, let me get it. I think it's on it's here. So it's Vernon,
Ah, yeah, yeah,
who wrote that one. It's a very nice and like you can see, very
yeah.
thin book. Compare that to the blue book, which I made the mistake once to read that book on the last day of my holiday on a beach, and that was that was not the smartest thing to do. I literally stopped reading because yeah, that was not the case. Of course, books like that technical, even if it's not just technical, but even with this kind of concept, that was definitely not something to read on a beach. That was what I realized.
Yeah.
I made that mistake a few times in my life, but this is one of these where that's definitely not
Yeah, and I think it's really important that then you read a book, you miss the context when that book was written, right? And you judge the
Mm.
contents of that book through the lens of your current experience. And even when we think about the concepts like extreme programming, Scrum, right? It was created at a certain point in time, and it was really innovative idea. Now we moved on, we have applied, we tested
Mhm.
these ideas, and nowadays we have different challenges. And that's why for me learning from people is much more important, because like book requires a lot of time to actually write, right? You have to really like the thought process, everything, like it could take years. But then if you meet a person and you talk to that person, you get the current perspective, like what's on their mind at the given moment. And as I mentioned, like
Oh, books are outdated the moment that they're published. I mean, except
yeah.
if you write. This is why I like so much Lean Pub, where you can actually update the
Mhm.
book and do. But even then, you still need my daughter has published a very small book on Arduino programming kind of things, and very nice thing. It's very thin. And I realized this weekend, like, oh, wait a minute, this has been now, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old. Uh, all these technologies have moved on. It helped for children to learn how to play and do these kind of things. But it's like it, the chances are that these technologies have moved on and that some of the exercise might not even work anymore. So I want to spend some of my weekends in the coming days to just practice, see does it actually still work? Because like you say, books are outdated very, very quickly. Now, if it's a Leanpub electronic book, then it's very easy to update that. If
Mhm.
it's self-published, then you can just re-upload it to Amazon, and everybody's buying a book now will have the updated version. But of course, if you have, just like you said, if you have one of these paper books lying around, even if on decides at some point I will update it, this book won't be magically updated.
Yeah.
So talking to the people is then much, much better. And you do that, where do you, because you talked already so passionate about ALE, is there a certain conference or anything where, yeah, community where you learn your DDD things?
Yeah, so I mean, there are several. So of course, we had DDD Europe as one of the biggest, I think, in Europe, and then there's another one, Kandinsky, which happens in Berlin. So these are the two conferences, and also there's an open space, a collaborative modeling camp, so COMO camp for short, that also attracts quite a lot of practitioners in the field of domain-driven design. But it's not exclusive to the domain-driven design. That's also another aspect that I really, really enjoy. And for me, open space is something that is preferable to like regular conference. However, then I just started learning domain-driven design. I actually found a lot of value in attending the regular conferences as well, because like a lot of these topics are new, and even though I've watched a bunch of the videos, actually meeting people in there, talking to them, and having an ability to ask questions is really, really valuable. And I actually was very lucky to get a speaking engagement in Kandinsky one of those like first years when I just started, because I don't learn things for the sake of learning. I start learning something just because I want to apply it. So naturally, I
Mhm.
already had some sort of case studies that I was invited to share, like based on my first year of learning the domain-driven design. And then you attend the conference as a speaker, it's easier to get connected and like meet other speakers. So yeah, in a way, I'd say I was very fortunate to have that access to a bunch of super, super accomplished, super knowledgeable, super smart people in that community as well. And yeah, learn from them. So I think I mentioned several names. I don't remember exactly the ones that I wrote, but I think it's really important to call out a few of them at least. So one of them is Marco Hasselhoff. Oh my gosh, I always forgot how to pronounce his last name. So he's an organizer of Kandinsky, and he's a consultant. We work with him. He supports us at Vented
Mhm.
to do a bunch of the domain-driven design things, because like while I'm learning, I don't feel always confident to facilitate certain sessions on my own. So his support, we became friends. Like we met through one of my colleagues. He knew Marco from before. He introduced us. We started working, and now we are actually good friends. Another person
That's
that
that's the conference that he's organizing, if I'm correctly.
No, it's
Okay,
actually
that's one of.
Kandinsky as a
Okay.
artist, but with three Ds in
Okay.
the. Okay, so
Yeah, I think I took it from his website, but he's organizing lots of different kind of things, I think.
well, I'm only familiar with Kandinsky. I'm not sure what else he is organizing, but yeah, I can share the links with you later on if you want to add them to the description of the talk. So then I just started learning. Just before I met Mariko, I actually went to watch some like YouTube videos, and there are two people that really kind of piqued my interest. I really enjoyed how they explained stuff. So one is Michael Plod, and then the another one is Nick Toon. Nick Toon has just recently published the book called Architecture Modernization. And in his book, we actually had our vintage case
That's
study.
his book, and he actually was helping out also on patterns and principles of domain-driven design. So Nick, indeed, and I loved it. It's interesting that you say it because, I've been in love with Nick. His YouTube videos. There's indeed a few talks on that you can find online
Yeah,
where, I really like, and based on that, I did. I don't think I received it yet, but I did order his book as well because I think
yeah.
it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, so
But
so
like you say,
you'll get a chance to read a case study from Vinted, which I co-authored with Nick.
wow, okay, thanks for sharing this. And indeed, it's really like a little bit like you say, we learn in multiple ways, and yeah, a book is just something in time. Of course, if you watch a video on YouTube, it's also something in time. But then you watch and you say, oh, this is actually a very cool thing. Let's watch what this person, in this case Nick, has to say more. And then you watch some more videos that are more recently, and then you see, well, I used to say this and now I say that. I
Mhm.
had that with a few other agile friends, that it's really wonderful that they sometimes say, I used to do this, now I think that, and I see then a couple of years now I'm back again to the first one because I've moved and bunched in different kind of directions, and now I see what are the boundaries from one way and boundaries not others. And that's so lovely about things like YouTube, where you can actually watch very quickly multiple kind of talks about this. And I really like that these
Yeah,
conferences put a lot of these videos online.
yeah. So yeah, that's a big part of what I was learning for the past few years. Another thing that actually first learned about was in some edition of Agile in Europe. I just don't remember what year it was. Feels like a long time ago. A clean language. And the last year, I was attending the Agile Alliance conference in Edinburgh. So the big Agile Alliance conference that we had in
Mhm.
Orlando like last year in 2023. They decided to do the simultaneous event in Europe in Edinburgh. I was attending the conference together with my friend Charlie. We were doing a collaborative session on coaching arcs. And in Edinburgh, I met Caitlin Walker, and she was already like a acquaintance of Charlie, and he introduced us. And Caitlin is working in the clean language. She has published a book. I think it's called "From Contempt to Curiosity." Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I love that book. And I think you talked about ALE. I think it was Judy Rees who talked
yeah,
about clean language at ALE a couple of years ago.
yeah. I think maybe it was in
Uh,
Switzerland. I don't remember which exact Agile in Europe it was, but yeah, I knew about that concept. It was really something that from the first time I heard about it, I really enjoyed it. But then I parked it somehow. But then I met Caitlin, and she's just so amazing. I mean, wow, I got this crush on her immediately. And she had this workshop called Drama-Free Conversations. And because we got some time to spend together in Edinburgh, and we talked about clean language, and she uses it like so seamlessly, in all the conversations. It's like it's not intrusive and so useful. And for me, it's always like it's a little bit clumsy. It's like a little bit hard for me to use it. But observing her, I attended her workshop as well. Like observing how she uses it, observing how she really has this like genuine curiosity was so fascinating, and I really wanted to attend the workshop that she did. And I'm trying to remember, was it November, December, like really late, like last year? Then I attended that workshop. So again, I could read a book, but then observing her, how she actually uses that skill set is way more influential to me than just reading it on the paper.
Yeah, for me, that feels a lot like, yeah, if you would pair program with someone, then you actually learn something doing it. Things like clean language, like you say, you can read it and it's like, yeah, logical. And then you try to use these words
Mhm.
and it's like, well,
Yeah,
what?
exactly.
So, yeah, I'm definitely not an expert in it, but I do believe a lot in the concept. And yeah, I had to find my own kind of words to say, okay, what is words that are fitting me, but that are also much cleaner than I would do before I knew the concepts. Um, and I did have a conversation with Judy Reese a couple of years ago for something else, and it was, yeah, amazing how in these conversation you immediately notice indeed these kind of languages, and it makes it
Mm,
very clear the power of these kind of things. Because I might be asking questions in a way that I'm not judging someone, but yeah, if I'm not using good clean language or not clean language that is not clean enough, it will come across as judging,
mhm.
and very easy. Well, actually, even if you use clean language, it might even come across as judging, depending on what's the mindset of the other people. But the better we are, or the better I am at using clean language, the more chances they are that to open them up and yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
hear my questions in a way. So thank you for bringing well, all of these people up and all of these concepts and the things, and it's so much in line with what you say about learning things and learning from doing, which is also something that is for me very linked to ALE, because for the people that don't know it, ALE, I don't know how it was this year, but I think it's very similar. In the past, it used to be in the morning, we do very much short keynotes, and in the afternoon, we do open spaces. And so conversations. So you'd have not enough time in the keynote to talk about something, and then the questions and everything, and we can have an open conversation, and again, much more interactive than just listening to a keynote that takes 3 hours. People are forced to condense their message in a very short way, and then we have time to discuss it where it's needed. And
Hmm.
it looks like that concept has not changed much, I think.
Oh no, no, definitely. We just added like a morning keynote, and then the remaining agenda was open space.
Yeah. Well, but I think that was always the case in the beginning. It's just smaller things, but maybe the keynote is a little bit bigger, but still, a lot is about having these interactions.
Yeah,
That is what.
yeah.
Okay,
So
let's move. Yeah, go ahead. What do you
no,
want
no,
to?
it's just like this other thing that I mentioned about this like collaborative modeling camp. I think that's again for me very important that people who practice come together to practice together, because there's, as you said about like the clean language, right? You read something, you believe in the concept, you think it's really logical, but it's really hard to get a crack of. And I think that in sometimes in real like work setup, it's hard to do something that you're not good at because of like high risk of failure, and you want to have this like safe space to actually practice it. And I think the conferences or like open spaces that create that opportunity for us to practice to get confidence actually has a better chance of like um, popularizing certain things. Like if you get this like a sandbox environment where you can actually get better at these skills, and most of these things are actually very like skills that require grinding, that actually require practicing, then more and more we will see it in the real life setup, in like real companies making that impact that they're supposed to be making.
And yeah, and like you say, or I'm not sure if you said it actually, but what I hear is that, especially in that safe environment where you can practice and play around with it, that the sandbox is what I'm hearing is really a safe environment where you can
Mm.
play around. The coach retreat that Oana Junku and me made was actually with that idea. We do a full day that we actually, you want to learn clean language, you want to learn some others. So we have a couple of things that we bring in that workshop. And the idea is you'll practice for, what is it, half an hour on some technology and or conversation technology, I should say, conversational skill, whatever, with some people who are observing, who are giving you immediately feedback. We can stop, we can repeat, we can try. Oh, this is a good way of doing. Okay, let's try it. Like we said earlier on, You have to find the right words. So, okay, if somebody gives you an idea, let's try it out. Oh, but that doesn't sound like me. Okay, let's retry it. What would sound like me? Okay, and you keep getting feedback, and then it's just a day of practicing with a hypothetical situation, because what if
Mm.
we've learned in that situation in the very beginning, we some people keep asking for, we want a real life situation, but the moment I do a real life coaching session with you on something, if then it's annoying if I have to repeat things, or if it's annoying because I'm someone else is talking about the situation and you're like, no, but that's not the real situation. No, we're there to practice the skills. We're just like, if I want
Yeah.
to play guitar, I will have to practice the skills. Of course, I don't do that in, if I would play an audience or whatever, then I have to keep playing. If I make a mistake, I have to keep playing. But if I want to practice playing the guitar, I will repeat it until I get it
Mm.
again, 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 and then I go live and then I play. Oh, it's a mistake. I keep going. That's a little bit what I think I'm hearing. We need places where we can practice these kind of
Yeah.
skills
Yeah.
for a lot of these things. So thanks for adding that last part of it, because I do think it's very important to keep stressing that. Okay, I want to move for me. One of the most interesting questions is, especially after such a lovely conversation, is there a question that I didn't ask? Is there something what you think I should also ask you, and what is the answer?
Mm. I thought that quite a lot of these questions were past related, and I wanted to add something that would be more like forward looking, something more about the future.
Mm,
And I thought that maybe like something that, what's the next like big thing, or like what's the next thing that I would look would like to like get my hands like dirty though. Because I talked about domain driven design, I talked about clean languages, some things that I wanted to learn in the previous years. I still need to get better at them and still keep practicing. But I think the next thing that I would love to get better at is a Kanban on a portfolio level. So I feel like I have enough knowledge about the Kanban and flow management in terms of like a team process. I want to see how it could be used in the concrete situation at Vinted and the teams that I'm working with on a higher level, how to encompass OKRs into this Kanban flow versus like quarterly iterations. I think Jürgen Appello talked a little bit about that, like flow OKRs.
mm,
So these are the concepts and these are the ideas. Even the book that I mentioned before, the semi book, the BET Success Metrics and Road Mapping, there are quite a few thought leaders in the product space that that have very interesting ideas, and I think uh, a little bit more into that product space, a little bit more in that strategic planning, portfolio level, using Kanban would be the next area where I would like to go explore and yeah, uh, learn and also make an impact in the organization using it.
I really like that answer, because indeed it's wonderful questions, but we go back a little bit at the past. It's also very interesting that so I don't know if you know, but this original set of questions came from a book that I published, where I asked the same kind of questions to people. And then that last question, it went all over the place. And somehow in this video, a lot more people talk about something of the future. And it could
Mhm.
be their personal future, could be the future of agile, whatever. But somehow I think we're living in a moment. Maybe it's because of Corona, but a lot of people like, hey, let's enough of the past. Let's also think about the future. We like to share our stories of the past because that's how we learn. And
Mhm.
yeah, it's wonderful stories. But a lot of us, I think, we're also forward looking, like, okay, what's next, where we want to go. So I really like that you put that also on a personal level, on and thinking about the direction where you want to go. So that's really wonderful to have that. And I think good, because I this is something I've learned also myself. Like, I don't do it that often anymore, but in the, yeah, I don't know, 20 years ago, I started to say, okay, every year during the holiday, I will think for a couple of hours. So where do I want to be in 5 years? And not as a kind of hard goal. And
Mhm.
but it's amazing if I sometimes look back at years later that I achieved some of these things without even having it as a goal. The most famous thing is at some point I sat down with my partner and said, "Okay, what do we want as a house?" And we put, yeah, we whole evening chatting and making very serious but also crazy stuff like what do we want from our house. And then I think 6 months later we did buy a house, and we didn't look at the list, but I found that list back while we were moving to the new house, and like only the pony on the hill we didn't have. That's about it. And that was of course mostly a joke, but everything else that was on the list, that was check, 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 check. It's like, wow, we didn't talk about it, we didn't
Mhm.
look at the list, but somehow visualizing, somehow thinking about that really helped us to, yeah, to go there. So
Mhm.
it's really healthy to do that from time to time. I think might have gone a little bit overboard to do it every year, because sometimes we don't always have the time and the energy to do that. Um, but it was never also about short-term goal. It was more like, okay, where do I want to go? Not so much today or tomorrow, because we do that in our daily routines already.
Mhm.
But just thinking and basically telling the world, hey, I'm open for these kind of things, or telling myself like, this is where I want to read more, or this is where people. So if people have tips and tricks for you, what you need to learn if you want to do it, I invite them to give some of these things. Maybe we'll learn some more about. And with that, I want to go to that very last question about who do you think I should invite next? Who you think is good, or good people, multiple people if you want to.
Yeah, so that was a tricky one. Like, I mean, there are so many great people in the community, and I feel like I'm excluding so many people. But at the same time, one part of like next year that I did not really talked about in this conversation is related to the person that I think you should invite next, and that's Christiaan Vervis. I don't know
Yes.
exactly, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly how to pronounce his last name, but what
because
he
it's
is
a
doing,
Dutch guy
yeah.
and working at the Liberators. That's
Exactly. Exactly. So I think the work that Christiaan is doing is purely amazing. He's very much into scientific research when it comes to some of these things that as an agile community we say, that's a good heuristic. So we are currently collaborating with him on a subject of temporary teams. Like we are experimenting at Vinted with mission teams, and there's like this whole old heuristic about long-lived stable agile teams, and then there's another like movement in the industry happening with like virtual teams, with short-lived teams, with like dynamic reteaming, and then the work that Jürgen Appello is doing, and it starts talking more about that there are different teams and they don't necessarily have to be long-lived and stable to be successful. And that's really a research that we are collaborating with Christiaan on, and he has done other stuff which is amazing. Like I read some of the papers that he has published, and it's really insightful, and it's really admirable to me how he really puts that rigor that um, and like doing a scientific research that is peer reviewed, like academia level stuff. It's really hard work. It requires a lot of diligence, it requires a lot of dedication, and he's really passionate about what he's doing. So I think that he is definitely a person you should invite and talk. I think he has very unique and very interesting perspective to share.
Yeah, well, I just talked about the hybrid book. He was, I think, with his partner with the Liberators, the first to. I'm not sure if it was the first, but one of the first people to give a tip about that. And yeah, because I invited him, because even with, okay, Liberators and liberating structures, how do you do that remotely? Is there an option on what? So his insights, and like you say, very research is not just like, okay, this is a fun thing to do, but it's actually it's proven why it works, and how much value that it brings. So very wonderful to have an opportunity to talk to him. I'm really happy that you invited him because, well, I've said it before on the show already. I have, let me check, 564 people on my list, of which I've invited already. I think, well, I've published 103. The 104 person goes live on Friday. So, but that still means 460 people to record. Well, there's like 10, 20 that are recorded. So let's say still more than 400 people that I need to invite and do. And I on purpose don't want to invite just the people I like most because then I have to do it's like I'll invite the people that are invited by others. I do sometimes make a little bit exceptions because I want to move my diversity numbers a little bit more in one direction or the other. But in general, most people have been invited these days. With 100 people that have invited more people, that is very easy.
Hmm.
Yeah,
I
focus
think
just
it's
and
really smart of you, to like delegate that responsibility. 'Cause it's super hard to choose. Like as I said, I felt like I'm excluding so many amazing people, and that's definitely not the intention. And like, how do you sort that list of 400 people? Like, who's the
it's
yeah,
impossible,
possible?
and that's it. And every time I think about people, I add them on the list, and yeah, and if, yeah, every time I watch that list. So this holiday season, I looked a little bit at my diversity numbers. I actually uh, you will receive how would I call it um, um, a questionnaire that I've created now this holiday season to know a little bit more because before I was saying, okay, I know this person now talking, so I think this person is this and that and that. And it's like, okay, if people are male or female, that is quite easy, not 100% because there's some non-binary people as well. But still, some of these things are clear. But yeah, if it would have been today, I would have guessed before this show, I would have guessed you as a non-author. But yeah, you did publish part a story inside Nick's book. Is that, do you consider yourself an author or not an author?
Not
That's
an
some of
option.
these things. And so in that sense, it's really, again, I'm offloading that responsibility to the people where they think, do they consider themselves creators and so other kind of things. Um, but I do add a lot of people there, and like I said, every time I look at that list, it's very tempting to quickly start inviting much more people.
Mm.
And yeah, then I just get more frustrated. So I'm like, no, no, no. Let's keep it to the people that are invited. And like I say, if I see that it's too many white old male, okay, then I will intervene a little bit to make sure that it stays balanced. Because at this moment, I'm still able to say that more than 50% are women. But actually, most of them I didn't invite myself. It's just because other people have invited them. Once that ball gets rolling, it keeps rolling more or less. So that's how things are. And it, like you say, it makes it a lot easier that I don't have to decide.
Oh yeah,
So
definitely.
yeah, so thanks for recognizing that. So it's been a wonderful time. If people want to contact you, if they want to connect you, if they say, "Oh, this is a wonderful story, but let's learn some more about you," what's a good way to connect to you?
So LinkedIn, I would say, is a first way of contacting
If
me.
I'm correct, that should be your number, or that should be your link. Of course, with the numbers, it might be a little bit harder to recognize, but maybe you
Yeah.
already know it by heart.
Also, I really appreciate meeting people like in real life. So in the upcoming year, I'm planning to be in a collaborative modeling camp, which I think it's gonna happen in Vienna again, and it's roughly around May, maybe a bit earlier this year. I'm planning to go to the Craft Conf in Budapest again. I think it's in May. I will yeah, for sure attend the Agile in Europe, which will happen in Budapest this year as well, end of August. I'm planning to go to Kandinsky, which is roughly around October. So, and there's of course the Lithuanian events like Agile Day Kaunas, Agile Day Vilnius. There's a good chance to meet me there. So if you plan to attend any of these and you see me, come say hi. Yeah, and if you want to stay in like a digital space, which is, I guess, easier than LinkedIn.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, thank you very much for your time. It's been, I don't know, well, of course, I start recording also before we even start talking, but I see that it's a little bit over 2 hours, but I think we just barely talked 2 hours because I started recording quite early today. But like I kind of predicted. It's kind of and you had what? Could you share the metaphor that you had? You had a really wonderful metaphor about that
Oh
time.
yeah, yeah. I mentioned that there's this hour clock in the one of the Harry Potter's movies, where if the conversation is really good and fun and engaging, the hour clock runs in one speed, and if it's like a boring conversation, it runs in a different speed. So yeah, we talked about like the energy, and you asked if I have a sharp deadline for the end of the talk, and I said like, yeah, I'm after working day, so the energy could be low, but at the same time, when you have the nice conversation, it starts changing. Actually, I couldn't predict that we were gonna talk for 2 hours. I did not really saw that coming, but yeah, I had a wonderful time.
It's yeah, it's always the same thing. I've had it regularly that I had a conversation and so much flowing, and I don't watch the time, and then I close the conversation and I go to my family. It's like, well, do you know this is like I had two conversations that were more than 3 hours. That's way too long, but still, even on YouTube, they're not the lowest watched videos, and sometimes people really love it. But indeed, in one of these cases, I went back to my family. Yeah, it's like, yeah, it's a long time ago. Yeah, it's nearly 2 hours. No, no, it's more than 3 hours that you thought. It's like, wow. It's like you say, when things are flowing, things are really going. And for me, that felt today like that as well. So thank you very much for your time. And indeed, let's hope to see each other in real life somewhere in Billy.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Thank you for watching Who's Agile, where the stories of agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other agilists.